In any complex human activity, there is always an endgame. Some people have an endgame in mind before they begin their quest. Others have no idea how the project or venture will end and just deal with whatever comes. The basic proposition is this: do you plan in advance to evaluate the possible results of the effort and develop the end game? Or do you just go with the flow and hope that the result will be what you would like it to be? I, Vivian Peters, am the planner. In my experience, the problem with an ad hoc strategy is that it rarely produces the most desired outcome. That's why I almost always have the end result in mind, how the end game will play out. I'm not going to bore you with my personal life before marriage or describe what me, Vivian, and my husband, Ralph, look like. You can think of me as an Amazon or a little mouse, with Emily's sex appeal Ratakovsky or the repulsive Roseanne Barr with a six-pack or bag. None of this is relevant because people of all shapes, sizes, and attractiveness are either planning their endgame or going with the flow. Ralph and I were, I really believe, in love. The problem I had was to define exactly what it means to be in love. I enjoyed Ralph's company. We enjoyed going together, or as a group, to concerts, plays, and hockey games, or just watching TV sitting next to each other on the couch. We treated each other well, had sex often, but we did not have children. We planned to eventually have children. But it wasn't long before Ralph and I, both 28, had been married for 7 years. 7 years is the approximate time when the notorious itch supposedly begins. And then it dawned on me. It's not that my sex life was bad. It just became too predictable. It wasn't as exciting as it used to be. I've always had a higher libido than most of my girlfriends, and I wondered what I could do about my current lack of arousal. Being a logical thinker, I first researched how to spice up my life with Ralph. However, Ralph seemed to have no interest in role play, sexy lingerie, whipped cream, or other supposedly classic ways of enlivening the bedroom experience or sex in unconventional places. For about 9 months, I tried to season myself with spices without success. That's when I made the conscious decision to have an affair. Because it was a conscious decision, I looked at it analytically like everything else in my life since my early teens. I had the following goals. First, a partner to whom I was sexually attracted. Second, a partner who had as much to lose as I did, probably meaning that he was married to someone he loved. Third, a partner who will not fall in love with me, but will simply enjoy recreational sex without emotional involvement. Fourth, a partner and a situation in which I could end the affair without complications within 10 to 16 months, since after that time I was interested in having children with Ralph. Fifth, a partner who I knew did not have an STD because condoms would dull some of my pleasure. Sixth, a partner who was not friends with Ralph and whose wife I was not friends with. Seventh, a partner who has a history of being secretive. Eighth, partner who had a schedule flexible enough that rendezvous could sometimes be spontaneous and who didn't have to count the last penny. After compiling this list, on my password-protected and biometrically protected computer, I realized that this was a difficult task. Fortunately, Ralph and I have many activities, are members of various community organizations, and belong to various national health clubs, each of which has several branches in our metropolitan area. I saw a lot of interesting guys in each of these situations and places, but I didn't look before. I didn't know much about them. I made a list of 10 guys I dated, or at least noticed before, most of whom I only knew by name or didn't even know by name, and had to describe them in other ways, such as the guy in the short shorts at Planet Fitness on Elm, or Jim Preston's tennis partner at the club. Between working on the social network, keeping my eyes and ears open, doing internet searches, and even sometimes pretending to be a health department official, over the next few weeks after compiling a list of goals and a list of known opportunities, I had a good idea of what I needed to do. Luckily, my work schedule allows for maximum flexibility. As long as I get my job done, I can work anytime and anywhere, although I have an actual office downtown. so I had a lot of opportunities to talk to the 10 guys I had in mind. It was quite slow but enjoyable, interacting and flirting with potential targets. After several hours of conversations at various points in time with potential targets, I discarded 6 as unsuitable for one reason or another, had no chemistry with 2, and had an awkward conversation with one guy I'll call Walt. Walt had just arrived at our country club pool after playing golf. Dressed in a bikini, I walked up to him and asked if the seat next to him was occupied or reserved. "Not at all reserved, Vivian. Take a seat," he smiled. "So, how was golf today, Walt? How do you know that I'm playing? I saw you walking towards the locker room just before I decided to go to the pool." "So you were spying on me," he chuckled. "And if this were so, would it bother you?" I asked, taking off my dark glasses and looking intently at him. "No, but why?" He grinned. "Maybe I think you're sexy. Isn't that too straightforward?" I answered with an evil grin. "Don't tell my wife Mabel that. She's jealous," he chuckled. "Are you too afraid of her to flirt? Or maybe even go a few steps further with me?" I answered in the most passionate voice and ran the nail of my index finger along his hand. "I'm not afraid. It's just not in my character. I'm a seriously monogamous guy," he answered firmly. Then, after a pause, he continued, in what seemed to me a joking manner. "Are you going to hang out by the pool all day trying to pick up guys, or are you going to swim?" "I need a swim." With these words, he jumped off the sun lounger and dived into the pool. Adding insult to injury, he sprayed me. It was such a blow to my ego that I almost abandoned my plan to have an affair right then and there, especially since there was only one guy left on my list. I put on my cape and, rethinking the situation, left the pool and headed towards the club. My grief was so great that I didn't pay enough attention to where I was going. As I turned the corner, I ran into Jim Preston and his tennis partner. I was almost knocked down, but my tennis partner caught me. The 3 of us exchanged apologies, and once it was clear that everything was fine, Jim said, "Vivian, I don't know if you were ever introduced to my tennis partner, Jared White. Jared, meet Vivian Peters, my longtime friend." Jim's tennis partner was the only one on my list who I had not yet interacted with, because he was not a member of the club and only occasionally came with Jim to play at the club. I just didn't have the opportunity to meet him. I took it as a good sign that I literally ran into him right after my most humiliating experience. The 3 of us chatted for a bit, and then Jared said, "Jim and I were going to get changed and then go to the bar." "If I don't impose?" I smiled. "No, please," Jim replied. "Meet me at the club bar in 15 minutes. "Definitely," I smiled. "And thank you for inviting me," I continued, running my hand over Jared's arm. As I slowly walked away, I got the distinct impression that Jared, and perhaps Jim too, were watching my ass. I didn't turn around to check it out, but I'd felt eyes on my ass before, so I figured that was another good sign. I had a great time at the bar talking with Jim and Jared. Without being too obvious to Jim, I did all the vampire things to attract Jared that my older sister taught me. These included staring into Jared's eyes as he spoke, occasionally tossing my hair over his shoulder with a head turn, unintentionally bumping into or touching him, and moving his lips in a sensual manner as I ate, or saw I made eye contact. Jim, unintentionally, I'm sure, since he was friends with Ralph, gave me some alone time with Jared, sneaking away about 20 minutes later, as he had to meet his wife for bridge. I offered to sign for the check. He objected, but I persuaded him. After Jim left, I started flirting even more, and I could tell Jared was interested. We talked for a total of about an hour before we both had to leave. During this time, I compared Jared to my list of romance's endgames. He met all the criteria that could be determined at the first meeting, namely, I was definitely sexually attracted to him. In fact, he was the most handsome of the 10 original candidates I listed. He was married and had nothing but good things to say about his wife. He showed me a photograph and she was very pretty, except that she traveled more on business than he would have liked. His high-paying job required security clearance, and he took pride in his ability to keep a secret. He had never met or even seen Ralph, and his work schedule was almost as flexible as mine. When we separated, we actually hugged, and I could tell there was some activity in his crotch. He said, "Maybe we can have lunch together sometime." I quickly responded, "How about Wednesday afternoon at Non Solo Pasta on the corner of Elm and 23rd, which is close to both of our offices?" Jared smiled widely. "Then see you later." I worked from home on Wednesday morning, so by lunchtime I dressed much more provocative than if I were going to the office. I chose lipstick and the most sexually arousing eyeshadow. Jared looked great when he arrived. We hugged, greeting each other. I had reserved a table and knew the manager, so we took a table a little isolated from the general noise. I got the distinct impression from Jared's body language that he was just as interested as I was, that we both just needed to see if our desires were the same. After a very flirty, funny, and intriguing lunch, I decided that being bold was the right approach. After I insisted that we split the check, I said, "Do you have time to go to the local park for a conversation I don't want to have at a restaurant?" "Can we meet in Grant Park in an hour?" Jared asked. "I have one problem that I need to solve at work." "No problem," I answered. We hugged goodbye. I drove to Grant Park, found a good parking spot, and worked on the computer until I saw Jared get out of the car. Hand in hand, Jared and I walked to a remote, isolated corner of the park and sat down on a bench. I got straight to the point. "If during my monologue you are not interested, stop me and we will part as friends," I said meaningfully. "Okay," he answered with a pale smile. "I'm sexually attracted to you, Jared. I would like to continue, but only under certain conditions." I expected objections, but there were none. "I'm interested in having recreational sex, perhaps for 10 to 16 months, with the utmost caution so that no one ever finds out again. At the end of this time, I want to take a break. I'm not going to fall in love with you, and I don't want you to fall in love with me. This is just the cherry on top of the ice cream of my life. What's your reaction?" Jared looked at me for what seemed like a long time. Then he moved closer to me, gently pulled my head towards him, and planted a truly passionate kiss on my lips. The kiss lasted a long time, and I responded in kind. When we finally parted with a smile, he said, "I needed to assess compatibility. I like it. Now that we have this preliminary test, I suggest STD testing as the next step," I replied brazenly. "And after that, how will we communicate?" he asked. "Draft letters," I quickly answered. When I saw the blank look, I said, "I'll teach you. Now about STD tests." When we returned to the parking lot, I showed him the new password-protected email account I had created using a computer at a library away from my home and office. "You draft an email in this account, but you don't send it," I instructed, giving him the password. "I'll leave you a draft letter after I return with the STD test. You log into your account a few days later, check your drafts folder, and write your message. I'll access it later and look through the drafts folder. We never, ever send email from this address. We only leave draft messages and never use names or any identifying information in draft messages." He smiled and kissed me again. It was nice. On Thursday, we went to different laboratories to get tested for STDs. I wrote a draft letter on our secret account saying my results would be back on Tuesday morning. I posted my all-clear results in my email draft folder on Tuesday around 11 a.m., and he posted his all-clear results around 2:30 p.m. At about 3:30, I deleted his message and asked, "Thursday noon, Hilton Suite on Highway 50? Around 4:00 cow, he deleted my post and wrote "on board" with a smiley face. I expected to be nervous when I showed up at the Hilton Suites on Thursday at 11:58. But why? I wasn't nervous. I just felt excited. When Jared saw my car, he walked up to the driver's seat, handed me the key card without any expression on his face and said, "Number 1210," and then walked away to the other end of the building. I walked towards the restaurant and checked around to make sure no one I knew was there and that no one was following me. Then I took the elevator to 1210. Jared showed up a few minutes later. "I was really looking forward to this," he chuckled. "Me too. There's no reason to waste time, right?" I asked rhetorically, throwing the dress on the floor, quickly unclasping my bra and pulling off my panties. Jared's eyes got as big as baseballs as my panties fell to the floor, and although he had more clothes on than me, he quickly undressed, looking at my naked body. We kissed briefly, then we got down to business. Despite how fast our intercourse was, the intensity of it left us both covered in a light layer of sweat, which, at least in my case, seemed to enhance the experience. Jared moved away and lay down next to me. "Wow, that was probably the most animalistic sex of my life," he chuckled. "I don't know exactly what came over me, but I definitely wasn't in control of the situation." We talked for a long time until his eyes suddenly opened. "How about another, more leisurely copulation?" he asked. Jared stood up, took my hand, and we both stepped off the bed. He sat down on the mattress, lowering his feet to the floor, and then pulled me towards him, pressing my back to his chest. It took a little maneuvering, but the feeling was magical. "It was as good as I hoped," I chuckled. We chatted a little more, and then I got up. "Today's the time to work," I laughed. "But not before the shower, huh?" he asked. "Okay, but we use my soap," I replied, pulling out a plastic bag with a half-used bar of soap from my purse. We had a nice shower, although without sex. I got dressed before Jared. I had less clothes. I gave Jared a quick kiss before leaving. "Be sure to wait 10 minutes before you leave," I smiled, "and tomorrow I will write a draft letter about the next meeting." "I can't wait," he replied. After my first adulterous sex, I felt satisfied. It was exactly what I was looking for. Really good sex for relaxation and without complications. Since the project I had to work on could be done from home, I drove straight home and put the laundry in the washing machine, along with the other clothes, and turned it on just in case there were any marks on them. I put the dress in my cleaning bag and then rinsed twice. I was able to concentrate enough to do my project. As soon as I finished, I started eating dinner, my thoughts oscillating between my pleasant afternoon pleasure and how excited I was to have sex with Ralph tonight. Poor Ralph didn't stand a chance if he wanted to have a good night. After a light dinner, I suggested we play a board game. To make it more interesting, I grinned, biting my thumb. "Let's decide that tonight the winner will do whatever he wants with the loser." We agreed. He laughed as we shook hands. I lost on purpose. Ralph surprised the hell out of me when he said he wanted to tie my hands to the head of the bed, blindfold me, and then there were so many offers that my head went spinning. To say that this was an unusual gamble on his part would be the understatement of the year, especially since he rebuffed my attempts to liven things up. I remember thinking, if he had done this a few months ago, I might not have been looking for Jared. But that thought was quickly replaced by memories of the time I spent with him. By the time Ralph untied me, I was practically in a coma, and he was giggling. "You're beautiful," I muttered, burying my head in his chest, and he put his hand on my chest. I fell asleep thinking, one of the best days of my life, after having two of the best sexual experiences within 10 hours. The next morning, Ralph and I were in good spirits. We had a passionate kiss goodbye, and I had a great day at work. I didn't even think about my adultery until after lunch, when I suddenly realized that I had to draft a letter for Jared about our next meeting. I checked my calendar and then drafted an email, next Wednesday morning or after 2 p.m. Before leaving the office, I checked my email. "Wednesday, 10 a.m., Best Western on Grove." I quickly replied, "I'll be there," with a smile emoji. On the way home, I became worried, thinking about Jared. I got so nervous that I decided I needed to relax a little. Instead of starting dinner, I showered and rinsed off, and when I heard the garage door open, I lay naked on my back on a couple of towels that I had placed on our kitchen table, thighs spread. "Hi, sex goddess Vivian, I'm home." Ralph grinned, leaving the garage. "What the—" he blurted out. I guess he wanted to know what we were going to eat that evening, but his eyes saw me before he finished his sentence. In a hoarse voice, I answered, "You eat at the U restaurant, and then I'll eat salami." Once we both came to our senses, I cooked him a decent dinner, only wearing an apron and high heels. He seemed to enjoy the food and the view. Jared seemed to really enjoy playing games, in addition to just having meaningless sex. One of our favorites was me dressing provocatively, putting on a wig and makeup, and then knocking on his hotel room door. "Hi, sport. I'm Mindy from Great Expectations Escort Service," I said, pretending to chew gum. "Come in, Mindy," Jared answered with a grin. After that, we agreed on the price, what I could do for him, and he begged not to use a condom. Ultimately, I reluctantly agreed to no condom because you're such a stud, and I believe you're pure. He then handed me $1,000 in Monopoly money, which I stuffed into my bra. We talked dirty, noticing what a great call girl I was and how horny John was. Other times, I pretended I was a maid and had to clean the room. He proposed to me, I resisted, and then he took me by force. The first time we acted out this scenario, I temporarily blacked out. Over the next few months, I rejoiced how well my plan is progressing. Not only was having illicit sex with Jared once a week great, but to my surprise, sex with Ralph was better. Not just for me, but for him too. I think this could be due to my body's natural production of pheromones subconsciously seducing Ralph. Around the 5th month of my program, I first noticed subtle changes in Jared. He extended our sessions whenever he had the opportunity, not trying to have sex again, but by cuddling or talking. He also kept pestering me to actually have non-sexual relationships with him on days when we weren't having sex. Whenever we met, he suggested we go out to lunch, go for a walk in the park, go to the zoo, or do other harmless things. Several times he even suggested that we spend a long weekend together. I didn't think too much about it at first, but one day, after usually great sex, when I rejected his offer to go out to dinner, he looked both hurt and angry. It got to the point that one day after we had been dating weekly for 8 months, he said, "Vivian, why don't we leave our spouses and get together?" At first, I thought he was joking and grinned, "Of course, this will really work." But when I looked at his face, I realized that he was serious. Why not? We are truly compatible, not only sexually, but we also get along even when we are not making love. Bells rang in my head. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," flashed through my head. "We don't have to make love, it's just sex," I told myself. Instead of putting into words what I was thinking, I tried to soften it. "Jared, remember our agreement before we started this case, not to fall in love. As long as there is only recreational sex between us, everything will be wonderful. Deeper feelings will ruin everything." He didn't look convinced, so I continued. "If we were together all the time, you wouldn't like me so much." 2 to 3 hours once a week of great sex doesn't really reflect a relationship outside of a hotel room. You'd get tired of me quickly. Jared didn't buy it. He tried to convince me that we had love and not just sexual compatibility. "Look, Jared, I love my husband. What I feel for him is very different from what I feel for you. You're a great guy. So maybe if we had met when we were both single, we could have been together, but that's not the situation. I don't want to leave my husband, and you shouldn't want to leave your beautiful wife." Jared didn't like it, but he seemed to accept it. I decided now was the time to lay all my cards on the table. My relationship with Ralph was better than it had ever been. And despite how much I enjoyed Jared, I was close to having children. Ralph's children. "Look, Jared, when we first started, we agreed that our sexual relationship would last 10 to 16 months. We are approaching the finale. Most likely, when 10 or 11 months have passed, I will give up everything. You are really good, but by then, I will be ready to have children with my husband." I could tell from his initial expression that Jared was crushed. A messy breakup was not part of my endgame. I was expecting an easy, clean break, especially because I thought he looked better than me. However, he seemed to come to his senses and said, "I understand, Vivian. It's just that you're so funny that I wish we could go on forever. But I agreed for 10 to 16 months, and I am a man of my word." When he said this, I smiled widely and said, "Thank you for your understanding. Are you ready for shower sex?" This seemed to improve his mood, and although he was a bit rude, it was a bright sunny day when I left the OB/GYN office. She decided that I was in excellent health, and she and I discussed my plan for having children. I've already made it clear to Jared that our date the next day will be our last. By the weekend, I intended to throw away the birth control pills. I called Ralph's cell phone, but it went to voicemail. This seemed strange to me since he was waiting for my call after a visit to the doctor to get permission to have a child. I left him a short, upbeat message telling him I was going to get pregnant that weekend, with the idea of calling him later that day. My second call to Ralph never happened. I was sitting at my desk in my office when I received a call from Lenox Hospital asking me to go there immediately. Ralph had an accident. By the time I frantically made it to the hospital, almost crashing my car several times along the way, it was already too late. Ralph was dead. While crossing the road near his office, he was hit by a driver. I was devastated and had to be sedated and was admitted to hospital that same night for observation. I spent the next week leading up to Ralph's funeral in a trance. Luckily, my older sister and Ralph's younger sister were able to spend some time with me and handle most of the preparations for his memorial service. It wasn't until after Ralph's funeral that I checked my secret email. Not that I had any interest in meeting Jared, just to let him know we wouldn't be seeing each other again. In my drafts folder, there were several messages from him wondering why I ghosted him. I answered briefly that Ralph had been killed and that I would not be able to talk to him for the foreseeable future. The next day he sent a draft response, expressing his understanding and wishing me well, but promising to keep in touch in case I wanted to talk. There was a police investigation into the accident that killed Ralph, but authorities had no real leads until his funeral. 10 days after the funeral, a local detective asked me to come to the station to talk. When I got there about an hour later, Detective Burns, a 30-something woman who looked like Gina Carano, asked me to watch some video. Vivian, we spent quite some time looking for any clues during our initial investigation into your husband's death, but just yesterday, we received video from 2 different surveillance cameras that we were previously unaware of. One video was taken on camera a block earlier, and the other was taken a block after your husband was hit. We'd like you to take a look at them to see if there's anything you learn that might help, Burns said. I'll try, I answered. Before you look at them, let me say that we think they show the car that hit your husband, but the license plate on it was stolen in the southern suburbs a few days before. Infestation? So that doesn't really help, Burns continued. As Burns played the video, I tried my best not to react. Luckily, the room was darkened to make it easier to see the video, so my reaction wasn't very noticeable. It was a Chevrolet Malibu, a popular car that had not undergone any significant changes in its styling for many years. The same model of car as Jared's. The glimpse of the driver in the second video was unclear, but he did look like Jared wearing sunglasses. The sunglasses were different. I had never seen them on Jared before. The car in the video had unique racing stripes. Jared's car also had racing stripes, but they were very different. However, I remember one time when Jared and I first met, he told me that his car's racing stripes were removable and that he liked to work on his car himself. Many thoughts were running through my mind as I asked for the video to be played multiple times. Most of my thoughts were scary. After about the 10th time, I told Detective Burns that I had seen enough. My eyes watered when the lights came back on. Burns apologized for putting me through the ordeal, although, thankfully, the video didn't show Ralph getting hit. I told Burns, I'm sorry to be emotional, but the idea that this could be the car that hit Ralph is very disconcerting. Unfortunately, I didn't learn anything. Sorry. I did not expect this, since we believe that the collision was accidental, but we need to explore all possibilities, she replied. Thank you for your hard work, Detective, and let me know if there's anything else I can do, I said. Then, as if it was an afterthought, I asked, I doubt this will be much help, but could you print out the best shot from the second video for me in case something pops up in my memory later? Of course, she answered, picking up the phone in the conference room. Let me call a specialist. Within 5 minutes, I had a better view of the car and driver, clearly showing the exact configuration of the racing stripes, the damage to the passenger side headlight, and the distinctive sunglasses. From the police station, I had to go straight home and collect my thoughts. After sitting in my living room, staring blankly at my favorite painting on my largest wall for 90 minutes, I came to a conclusion about what to do. I jumped up and checked my secret email. There was a spam email. They even reach random secret and rarely used accounts. And something in the drafts folder from Jared that was placed there last week. Jared's draft letter said, "Is there a time you would like to meet and talk?" I replied, "Give me about 2 weeks. Check regularly and I'll let you know." Even though I had never been to Jared's house, I knew where he was. It was located on a cul-de-sac in the southern suburbs of our metropolis, 3 miles from where the license plates for the alleged hit-and-run were stolen. In the middle of the night, dressed in dark clothes, I went to Jared's house. I was lucky. His Chevrolet Malibu was parked on the street and not in the garage. I examined him carefully. While I'm no expert, I didn't need to notice that the racing stripes were different than I'd ever seen before, and that there appeared to be glue residue in one place where there was a wide red stripe in the photo of the suspect car. Additionally, it was clear that the headlight and chrome mounting bracket on the passenger side were new, and although the paint on the headlight housing was the exact same color as the rest of the car, it had more shine than the surrounding areas. I needed to do something. A few days after my overnight trip, I wrote a draft letter to my secret account, asking Jared if he could meet me at a Motel 6 in the northern suburbs at noon the following Friday. He quickly confirmed. I was nervous when I met Jared because my main goal was to find out if there was anything that could confirm my suspicions that he killed Ralph. I knew I would have to have sex with him, but I needed to be sure before I took the next step. I must be a great actress, because he was so affectionate and did not suspect anything. At first I had sex with him, thinking of myself as the Black Widow, a spider who devours her mate. Once he was drugged, I subtly brought up topics that I hoped would get him to open up. Although it took some time, it finally opened. He started asking around about whether we could have a future together so that something good could come out of the tragedy with Ralph. I objected, telling him that it was too early to talk about it, but there was hope for the future. During our conversation in bed, I specifically asked him if he knew anyone who even suspected that we were close, and he strongly denied that he had told anyone, and was confident, especially given our precautions, that no one knows nothing. What about Jim? I've only seen him 3 or 4 times since we made love, and I've never even mentioned you, and neither has he. To make sure Jared didn't suspect anything, I went to a late lunch with him after our meeting. Jared and I went to his Malibu for lunch. During the ride, I picked up a pair of distinctive sunglasses from his remote and said, "I like these sunglasses, Jared. I hope you don't mind if I take a photo of them." I didn't wait for an answer, but he casually said, "Of course," after I took a photo with my iPhone. "I wonder if they have those with blue lenses." I smiled before returning them. Returning home, I replayed the recording of our conversation on my iPhone several times. Using a magnifying glass, I also compared the photo I took of his sunglasses with the glasses in the photo from the detective. I convinced myself that I had enough evidence from examining Jared's car, his conversations with me before and after killing Ralph, his motive, and comparing his sunglasses to the driver's glasses in the photo that Jared was the killer. Later that week, I went to a gun show in a neighboring state where gun laws are lax and no questions asked and no answers given, to buy a Glock G44 22CR handgun. The guy who sold it to me from his trunk carefully explained everything about how it works. Once I bought it and 20 rounds, 2 magazines, of 22, I took the Glock to the range and shot 15 rounds. This was enough to familiarize me with the operation of the pistol, how it felt when fired, how loud the sound was, etc. 2 days later, I wrote another draft of the text on my secret email address. I arranged to meet Jared at the same Motel 6 as before, the one that was so far away, and told him to get the farthest room. After changing, I took a taxi to a truck stop about a mile from the motel and walked there, holding a valise containing a change of clothes and other disguises. Jared opened the door with a big smile when he noticed my disguise, and I acted like a fake call girl when I said, "Don't touch it, John, until you pay," while pretending to chew gum. He walked me to the motel room without touching me. When I entered, I took a pillow from the bed, took a Glock from my purse, and, Using the pillow as a fairly effective silencer, I pumped 4 bullets into his chest. While he lay there, I stood over him, pointed the gun at his forehead, and fired the last bullet into his brain. "This is for killing Ralph, idiot," I managed. After waiting 5 minutes next to his dead body to make sure no one would react to the muffled shots, I put all 5 shell casings in the pocket of my purse. I didn't think there would be any reaction since it was the middle of the day with no other guests around, and there wasn't really any reaction. After putting on gloves and changing clothes, I fished the car keys out of his pocket, drove his car to a bad part of town but closer to the Flea Hotel, and left it on the street with the keys. I wiped down all parts of the Glock with alcohol wipes and left the gun on the floor near the rear passenger seat. On the way to the hotel, I threw 5 spent cartridges into the sewer. At the hotel, I took a taxi, which dropped me off at a shopping center 2 kilometers from my house. I threw both masks into a trash can at the mall and went home. When I returned home, I deleted all remnants of the secret email account, including from my hard drive. Until now, a year after I killed Jared, the cops hadn't contacted me. I also don't expect to be contacted in the future, since as far as I know, no one other than Jim even knows that I know Jared, and no physical evidence links me to him. Jim, of course, did not suspect anything when, a week after Jared's body was found, he said to me, "Do you remember my tennis partner, Jared?" After a pause, I said, "Yes, I remember. How is he?" He was killed. I feigned shock and even shed a crocodile tear. Did I feel bad for shooting Jared? Hell no. Do I feel crushing guilt for having an affair with my husband's killer? Yes. I continue to feel overwhelming guilt and will probably never be able to get rid of it. Am I sad, annoyed and angry at myself for how far from the intended ending everything turned out, for how disastrously my romance ended? Still would. No words can express my despondency or the extent of my self-loathing. What should I do about this? Other than working 20 hours a week at a women's shelter and donating all the insurance money from Ralph's death to worthy causes, I have no idea. I no longer have confidence in designing an effective endgame. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.